So, good morning and welcome to this morning's seminar. Really pleased that you could join me today to talk about how marketing sustainability can create purposeful narrative and grow your brand reputation. So what I want to do over the next kind of 40 minutes is talk to you a bit about what sustainability is. I'm sure there are plenty of you in the room who've heard about sustainability and probably know a bit about it. But it's about translating that into what it means for real life, really. And then also how we can deliver impactful content and grow our brand reputation using that kind of theme, how we can make it happen, and some steps to start with. But first of all, who am I? So I know some people in the audience already, so thank you for your support today. But some of you won't know me at all, and who am I to stand here and talk to you about this today? So basically, I've got 30 years in marketing commercial experience, some in corporate, some in small business, and I've run my own business for the last 9 years. So I've got a really good grounding as to not just marketing and what marketing can bring to a business, but also that commercial aspect. So I understand the pressures of business, I understand kind of the financial reporting, but also the processes that go behind running a successful organisation. And then earlier this year, I was awarded a level 6 from the Chartered Institute of Marketing in Sustainable Marketing. So that gives me the opportunity to kind of like lead responses and developments within that sustainable area. So identifying opportunities, but also working out what can be communicated and how it can be communicated effectively for an organisation. So first of all, what is sustainability? So who hasn't heard of sustainability? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so sustainability, a really, really common word these days, a very, very common theme, talked about in the media all the time, but what does it really mean? Now, in my little world here, sustainability is a really, really big word that covers a lot of aspects, a bit like marketing really. There's lots of aspects of marketing, also lots of aspects of sustainability. So what I like to do is look at sustainability from a 3-pillar framework, which is the ESG framework, which again, many of you will have known about. So the E standing for environmental, S for social, and G for governance. So environmental, automatically we think about carbon emissions and they're kind of like the green areas of our world, our planet, whatever. But it does go further than that as well. So it might also consider local biodiversity or habitats that surround a production site, for example. It might also include the working environments that you have within your business, and it might be a sole business or it could be a much bigger business. From a social point of view, that's all about people. So again, looking at employees, how they are communicated within the workplace, how they're treated in the workplace, the culture, all that kind of stuff there. But also looking at communities, and that could be local communities that are associated with the business and in the surrounding area, but also local business communities as well, and who you interact with in your industry and outside of your industry. And then governance is really how the business is run. So that's looking at policies, what policies you have in place. Do you have diversity and inclusivity? Do you have ethical practice? Do you have whistleblowing, for example? And also those procedures and processes that run the organisation well. So again, it might be areas that you need to look at procedures to make sure that they're in place and effective, but also that your processes are really efficient, not just for the workings of the business, but also the people that work in that business. So quite a lot in there, lots of elements to go at, and that's why I think sustainability as a whole can be quite overwhelming. What I like to say to people I work with is the statement that sustainability is really being more responsible. So it's you as individuals, but also as organisations, taking more responsibility and making sure you're creating positive impact in whatever way you can. But why does it even matter? Who really cares? Well, it turns out quite a lot of people actually care about ESG or sustainability. So anybody here work in the public sector? No one. Oh, yes, okay, 2 at the back. So you guys will know this already. So if you work in the public sector or you tender for the public sector, you are required to have elements of ESG or sustainability in your business or organisation before you can even work with them. So people are already, or organisations are already looking for those qualities within other organisations that are going to supply them to make sure they are being more responsible and being more effective in that arena. But equally, investors and funders are also going to look for that. And it's those businesses and organisations that are proactive in positive impact around ESG or sustainability that they will look more favourably upon. Equally, from an employee point of view, if you've got some really great people in your business, you're going to want to keep them, right? So, by offering them more than just a good salary, or more than just a salary in a car, or whatever those options might be, if you're looking at things like well-being days, or membership to the gym, or input into how the business is run, and that kind of communication, that actually is really appealing for people as well. And especially those younger generations that are starting to come through to work, they're looking for something more than just a salary. They're looking for purpose. And that's, if you can deliver that as an organisation, you can make sure you're keeping the talent that you want in your business, but also attracting more talent as well. And then conscious consumers. Well, we're all consumers, whether that's buying publicly or whether that's buying as a business. So we're becoming, as a group, much more conscientious about how we buy. And there's lots of data and reports out there now proving that. So McKinsey, for example, they carried out a study, and 66% of the respondents said they are much more conscious about buying sustainable. Okay? Mintel also, they've just released their global trends for 24-25. And again, there's a much more, although it's a slow drift, it's much more shift towards recycling packaging, making sure those purchasers are really conscious about what impact they're having and following those brands that really offer those values to the public. And then stakeholders. So stakeholders are a much wider picture, really. So stakeholders in this context, quite often we used to think about stakeholders as the shareholders of the organisation, and now it's a much wider picture. So it could include local authority, it could include media, it could include local volunteering groups or communities. So it's just thinking on that much more broader scale, not just about the insular to the business or the organisation, but on a much wider scale and what impact that's having and what you could have. Equally, there's more evidence that shows if you can have a purpose aligned with a profitable business, because clearly we need profit in the business to keep the business going, if you can have a purpose alongside that as well, that shows impact on social, on communities, on employees, then actually those businesses will last a lot longer. You'll have natural longevity within those organisations. So who's already taken advantage of the kind of ESG framework and putting it into their organisation to grow a better brand reputation? So one example you might know about Beyond Meat. It's a fantastic brand pioneering plant-based meat alternatives. And they've taken the market a little bit by storm, actually. And one of the reasons is because they're so transparent and so aligned with their customer base. So you know exactly what their customers are looking for, but they're really open and honest about the impact they're having and the data behind that. So for example, this screenshot of their website there states that they're in comparison to the meat industry, by the way, this is, that if you buy from Beyond Meat, basically you're helping them use 93% less land, emits 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions, use 46% less energy, and use 99% less water. Those are really strong statements to say, and they're very clear to say it's against the meat industry, it's not general data there, but it's really impactful. So those people who are really aligned with that will absolutely move to them and like the transparency, and it's almost like creating a bit of an activist group, really. So they're also really transparent about where they source their product from, their production processes, and all that kind of stuff as well. And they've been really clever because they've done some excellent brand collaborations. They've worked with other businesses within the industry, some of which perhaps may have had a slightly dubious sustainability message, perhaps, or persona. So McDonald's hasn't always been thought of very favourable in this area, or generally, actually. Sometimes it's sort of not a great food option. But the fact that they've partnered with Beyond Meat means McDonald's are giving their own customer base another alternative. So they're appealing to a new audience, so technically creating a new revenue stream for them. But equally, on the other hand, Beyond Meat have taken advantage of all that mass exposure. So going from quite a small brand to absolutely like global, across all the billboards, on every menu, they have got the exposure there. So it works really, really well for them. Equally, Patagonia you may have heard of. So again, they're in outdoor fashion. Their values and their qualities of the business are really, really obvious on their site. They're very clear about the communication across all the channels that they use, about the fact that they make durable clothing. Yes, it might be more expensive, but they're encouraging people to buy less, but make it last for longer. So they offer guarantees on repairs. They're very clear about where they get the products from. They're very innovative on how they manufacture products. And they also align their values, again, with their client base, and that's what's really important here. But that's all well and good for global brands, isn't it? Because we're not all got like loads of money to spend and throw around. So what about what's happening in the North East? So these are 3 brands in particular that I've picked out. Teesdale Cheesemakers, you might know of, they're based in County Durham. They're a fabulous cheesemaker. If you like cheese and it's Christmas coming up, they're just releasing their Christmas orders, so please get them in. I don't get paid for any of that, by the way. But basically, they hand make cheese on site. They have phenomenal values. So they use milk that comes from a family farm, which is literally down the road from them, and they transport it every morning. Some of the byproducts from the manufacturing of the cheese actually goes to pigs on the land, so the whey that comes off the cheese goes to the pigs that they've now got on the land. They're also looking at rewilding and biodiversity as well. So the land they've got there, they're trying to bring back habitats that used to be there, and they're working really hard to do that and taking lots of advice. They're not just doing it off their own back, they're taking lots of advice. And they've also been very innovative in creating these off-grid glamping experiences. So if you are a bit sick of the humdrum of normal life and you want to literally get off-grid, they are the people to go to, because it's the beautiful glamping lodges, the biostream, it's beautiful, you're literally hidden away from everything, it's amazing. And then there's also Blackfriars restaurants in Newcastle. So again, they source locally, so they have to change their menus to go with the seasons. They use their peelings from vegetables and fruit, for example, to make vinegars and garnishes. And they've also worked really, really cleverly with their suppliers to make sure they've got a take-back packaging agreement. So they don't have to deal with the packaging that they're delivered. The supplier has to take that back on their agreement. So they don't have to worry about that waste. They can deal with whatever other waste they need to deal with, but they don't have to worry about that part. And then Johnson Clark, who are based just on the North Yorkshire border, they are architects and surveyors. They have an incredible service provider, and the building they actually work from is so sustainable in itself, there's not a lot they can do with it. So it's like really amazingly built. It's got amazing heating and water usage and all this kind of stuff. They're a service-based business. They're super efficient on their tech, but also very secure. So it means they haven't got a lot of scope to play with as a business as to what they can do from a sustainability or an ESG point of view. So what could they do? So what they did used to do is they used to go into their clients and drop off little sweetie packs on a Friday afternoon or whatever to give their clients a bit of a sugar rush, you know, get them through to the weekend or whatever. And instead of doing that now, they deliver what they call bee bombs. So they have little packs with wildflower seeds in. They deliver those to their clients, and the client can use that either in window boxes or on the site, or they can take them home and replant them. So they're already encouraging and influencing their clients to do this kind of activity. So it's a great influence there as well, and education. Now, whether these 3 brands in particular talk about the values and what the activity they're doing very clearly or communicate it all the time, that's a different conversation, okay? So why should you guys take advantage? There's 2 strands to this. The first one is your brand reputation, which obviously is the main headline for today's seminar. So your brand's reputation is the internal DNA of your organisation. It carries all the values. It champions your values for you. It's how you work, the culture of your business, what you'll portray, what expectation you're giving to your customers. If you can embrace elements of ESG that align with your client base or your customer base and show that that's what you're doing and be active with it and be very transparent and clear, you will reach out to many people who have those values. And equally, you will earn their customer loyalty and their customer trust even more so. The other thing on this is the recognition and identity side. So the more your brand can be recognized and identified in the marketplace, the more likely people are going to want to buy from you because you're in their peripheral area. So the more you can be there and be the brand of choice, the more likely the distance between you spending money on your marketing and actually getting money on your till is much shorter. And that's really what we want to do. When you spend money on marketing, you don't want to wait forever to get your money back. You want your return on investment to be fairly or as quick as you can do, really. So the more you can be present and the more you can demonstrate your values and you're meeting their expectations and their need to buy, even if they don't buy from you directly, they will refer you on. Okay? The other element is the longevity of your organisation as a whole. So much more from a kind of like practical process innovation side. So again, embracing ESG encourages collaboration, innovation, diversification. You might end up with new products and services, which will reach new revenues and new markets. It might give you extra efficiency, and that might be tech efficiency, it might be machinery, it could be people, it could be activity-based costing type thing, whatever that is, but it's all going to drive efficiency within the business, which could bring you long-term cost savings, potentially, but also, again, make you a much more robust business, and also attract that talent you want in. There's also the element of being the industry influencer. Again, from a brand reputation point of view, if you can influence your industry and be a voice for that, that's amazing credibility for your brands. And then reputational risk management. So by being proactive and looking forward to what might come into the market from, again, innovation, efficiency, from an ESG framework point of view, then you can actually show that you're managing that risk in advance. Again, you're being proactive, you're being an industry leader, and that all counts towards your brand reputation. So ultimately, if you can do all that, you can start commanding premium pricing if you don't already within your marketplace. It adds value to your brands, which again is a valuable asset, and it gives people a reason to share. So it tells people why you or why they should tell other people about you, why they should buy from you, what you're going to solve, and then why they should tell other people. So you're opening up new markets, new audiences, potential new customers. And ultimately, obviously, increased revenue, increased profits, and also increased opportunity for reinvestments. And not least of all, great marketing content. So you could talk about all of this in your marketing content. There's only a few barriers as to why people don't literally plaster this everywhere, which I'll come onto in a second. So how do we actually make it happen? So we need to make sure whatever elements of those three pillars I talked about before, the environmental, social, and governance pillars, whatever elements you decide within your organization you can bring in and work on, they need to be aligned with your brand values and your customers' expectations. So if you're starting to talk about something really out of the ordinary, it's going to take a lot for people to understand why you're talking about it. But if you naturally had values within your organization that relate to ESG elements, then those are going to be the ones that you naturally would speak about probably anyway, or already evident. Equally, they need to line up with your business objectives. There's no point in embracing ESG or sustainability and having objectives that are completely at loggerheads with your normal business objectives. So whether that's financial, whether it's employee engagement, whatever that might be, they need to dovetail in. So either you adapt your business objectives or you create new ones to make sure they embrace this factor as well. And then reflect it throughout the business. So in any business, all your marketing or your branding should reflect all your business anyway. This has to be exactly the same. ESG has to sit on the top of your agenda, just like, again, financials, profits, employee engagement. And by aligning all that, it underpins your brand reputation, creating more memorable brands. So, like I said before, the more memorable you can be, the more likely people are going to buy from you. And collaboration is absolutely key. And I love this quote from Helen Keller. I think it's absolutely perfect. Because can you imagine one person doing one thing one day for many days is great. It's like a great start. But you can imagine all of us, so all organizations or all individuals, or organizations and individuals doing something, it's going to create a much bigger impact. So to maximize your impact in this kind of area, you can do lots of collaboration. So for example, you can collaborate with your supply chain, with your customers, with local businesses, with NGOs, with charities. There's some great opportunities to join with local communities or volunteer communities, rewilding, replanting, all that kind of stuff. So there's been some great examples. One in the UK is Gymbox and Rajasthana. So they're based down in London. They're basically offering reduced cost or free fitness opportunities for underprivileged families and communities. So it's a great way for both both brands, to get together and really give something back and to be able to measure that impact as well. And then Copenhagen, for example, okay, not in England, but Denmark's not that far away, but they're offering free meals and free museum entries if you basically tour Copenhagen on a bike, so as a tourist. So there's some really, really clever ideas out there, and it's not that difficult to really think of them. It's just you can't necessarily do it on your own. You have to have that collaboration. And joining together actually helps amplify your story as well. Because obviously you've got two organisations talking about it rather than one, or 5 organisations talking about it rather than one. So measuring and communicating impacts. Measuring is absolutely critical because metrics build credibility both internally and externally. So you need to make sure, again, within your organisation that this is a bloodline through your organisation. So people on board that work for you or collaborate with you, collaborative partnerships, understand what you're trying to achieve and what you're delivering and your goals, so they can also get on board. And those metrics will prove, again, the impact you're having. And that's probably the most important thing here, because without that data and that evidence, it's really hard to prove the impact you're having, and therefore that's why people start picking holes in businesses or brands. So again, before you can measure, you need to establish a benchmark. So a line in the sand where your starting point is, because if you don't have a line in the sand, you've got no idea where you're going to go forward. And, excuse me, and when transparency and proof, I've just mentioned that. So there are lots of tools for tracking out there. So for carbon footprint, carbon emissions, for example, there's loads and loads of different calculators. Now, normally, I would recommend the normative business carbon calculator that I use through the SME Climate Hub, but they've actually just announced yesterday, very timely, that they're not going to use that anymore. So that's going to get scrapped. So there are a couple of others, like through the Carbon Trust or Small 99 if you're small businesses. Otherwise, you can always go to an auditor. There's lots of auditors. There are various people in the room who can definitely signpost you to that type of thing as well. Also, ESG reporting frameworks and auditing, like I said. But you yourselves can look at life cycle analysis, so the life cycle of your products as well. So where do they start from? Obviously, the manufacturing process, where they got sold to, what happens afterwards, what happens after that. So really, that kind of like real full working party of stream of information. You can look at your energy bills or your water bills. You can look at activity-based costing, waste reduction, compliance, and also local government targets. So working with local authorities is also really, really clever. So if you can understand what their goals are and what they need to achieve by when, then that can give you some, again, lines in the sand as to where you can start approaching that as well. So are there elements that they're working to that you could also work to and help them? It starts a really nice relationship with them as well if you don't already have that. And what's really important is obviously the communication of that impact. So regular updates, whether it's on reporting, whether it's on newsletters, whether it's on your social media, on your website, whatever that might be, is really important for people to understand the continuous impact you're having. So it's not just about we've started or this is our end goal, it's about how we're doing and how we're progressing. And then engaging your audience. So clearly, having your audience engaged is absolutely important as well. So using platforms, but being really clever about it. So what kind of media can you use that makes it different? Could you use more video? Just a little nod to Hal Media there, giving this sat to the audience. More video, or be really creative with your video. Maybe you get different voices in. So maybe it's community voices. It's not just you as an organisation on film. It's your community, and they're telling the story of the impact you've actually had. Also look at real world case studies. So what are locals, SMEs to you also communicating? Are they talking about the impact they've had in the local community? Are they talking about some biodiversity they've worked on and some habitat? They've been rewilding? Have they helped a community elsewhere out of the country perhaps? What are they doing? What do you like about what they're doing and what you don't like? Because that's equally as important. But there's also a little rule to have here, which kind of goes with business anyway, right? So just try and communicate it without being too preachy about it. Rather than saying, we are the best, we're better than our competition. Slaty competition never goes down well. But be proud and humble about it. You know, there's no reason not to be proud about the actions that you're taking already and the impact you're having. It's just how you communicate that. So one way to do that is by using stories. So all humans love a story. It's like gone from years ago, every human loves a story. And there's a few approaches you can use to tell your stories. So for example, you can use brands. So you can talk about your purpose, your personality, your values and missions, but you're humanizing your brand. So you're really positioning yourself as to where you stand in this kind of environmental and social impact arena. There's also purpose. So why do you even care about sustainability? Again, if it's quite unusual for you to talk about this, you need to understand how you can communicate why it's vital that you've now embraced this and want to communicate it. sort of talking about your commitment. So what are we going to do? How are we going to progress? How are we going to tell people how we're going to progress? What frequency are we going to use? What media are we going to use? And also those tangible results. So like I said, proof and transparency are absolutely key. Because if you have the proof and transparency, it doesn't matter if someone comes up to you and says, well, actually, I think you're doing this. And you say, well, hang on, I've got all this data. We know we're doing this. We're absolutely squeaky clean. And you need to be squeaky clean on it, don't get me wrong. And then the narrative. So creating a compelling reason for people to want to engage with you and want to buy from you or refer you onwards, but also that resonates with your business. So again, it goes back to how your personality of business is presented, how you communicate, the language you use. And like I say, authenticity is absolutely critical. So the fear of greenwashing is absolutely real. Everyone's heard about greenwashing, right? Yeah. So tends to be a lot of medium, let's say large businesses that get called up for greenwashing. So there's been some really good cases in the press about Unilever, for example, with Dove, with Georgia Asda, with Boohoo. All have amazing legal teams that, you know, probably work very hard to minimize the impact on their brands, but the damage was there, and they've now had to sign agreements or pay fines or whatever. So the fear is real. And when I speak to organizations about ESG and sustainability and how to communicate that, they often say, but I'm really worried about what's going to do, because what if someone says blah, 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 blah? What if someone calls us out and we can't show? Well, don't let that happen. If you have the data and you're genuinely embracing this and invested in it, you won't have to worry about that because you have all the proof you need. So if somebody ever comes up to you and says, well, what about this and what about that? You say, well, we have the data, it's here, it's proof. Or go to our website, it's all listed on there. And that's why it's important not to kind of like be grandiose and make all these gestures about, you know, we're going to be net zero by next year. Well, not many businesses will ever be net zero, actually, probably. But if you can say we're going to reduce our emissions on our supply chain by 10% by the end of 2026, okay, well, let's see how you're going to do that. Have you got some working parties together? Clarify it and make sure the evidence is there. So like I say, if you be genuine, be transparent, give proof and data-driven evidence, and it shouldn't distract you from marketing that information or communications to your public. Building trust through storytelling, and obviously learning from failures. So just don't do what the big boys have done, or the little boys sometimes. So where to start? I always advise with anything with marketing, start small. You want to test and trial, okay? So starting small, in my opinion, in this area, is kind of initially getting your sustainability assessment criteria on the ground, basically. So you're identifying your benchmarks, so where are you now? And you might pick, again, 2 or 3 different elements from ESG to work on or to highlight within your agenda for the business. And I find this graphic at the bottom, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, is a really good way of just referencing what you already do in the business or the organization. So you can go through those 17 elements of those goals and decide, actually, yeah, we already address no poverty because we give above fair wages, or we already address water because we do water recycling or whatever it is. So you can go through there and say, yeah, actually, we're addressing these areas already. We know about it. We've got the proof there. Let's get a little internal working party to really work on proving that data, see what else we can do, and that's part of your narrative then already starting. So making sure, obviously, whatever elements you bring in from ESG are aligned to your brand's purpose, your brand values. Making sure you've got some targets in there. So again, for you to be really clear and transparent and authentic about the impact you're having, you have to have some goals in there, some numerical goals, to say you're reducing something by 1%, or you're going to be delivering this, or you're going to interact and bring this to the community, whatever it might be, but they have to be set goals. And ideally a bit of a stretch, because, you know, no one likes a comfortable goal. And then also creating an ESG strategy and a roadmap. So again, that will then deliver how you're going to progress to reach that goal, how you aim to progress to reach that goal. So reviewing current processes as well. It might be that you look at your internal processes, whether it's people, whether it's tech, whether it's manufacturing, whatever that might be. Because again, there might be efficiencies you can already capture there. Identify what's already good and areas for improvement, and then you can start to build your narrative. And it's really important that narrative goes internally as well as externally, because those people who work with you, again, with their employees or with their collaborative partnerships, they need to know what you're doing and how it's working and what their involvement is as well, what their responsibility is. Okay, so then you can assess your impact. So whether it's measuring your carbon emissions, whether it's your waste reduction, whether it's the impact on social communities. And within that, again, you need to be really precise, just like you would do for financial reporting for your organisation. You need to make sure you've got that criteria in there. So what metrics are you going to record, who's going to record it, the frequency of that, how they're going to report it, and so it goes on. It has to be dealt with exactly the same as you would do your finance or your profit. And then you can start collaborating. So we talked about collaboration before. So either within your industry, it could be outside of your industry, it could be local community groups, whatever that might be. But create some working parties so you can start those conversations, even if they're not started now. For you to be that proactive to start the conversations will already start to influence your industry. And like I said, authenticity absolutely matters. So be as genuine as you possibly can be, and then be more so. Because the more data you have, the more transparency and clarity you can bring, the squeakier clean you are, and therefore nobody can pick holes in your argument or your statements or what you want to portray online when you're trying to talk to your customers. Okay? So plan your communications as you would do normally anyway, obviously for all your marketing. Everyone clearly plans their communications. So looking at language, your channels, and again, evidence, and reflect. So again, go back and review what proof do you have, what transparency are you communicating, what feedback have you had, what else can you do, what other media can you use, how much more creative can you be. So, final thoughts. Sustainability, in my opinion, is definitely an opportunity for you to grow your brand reputation. You just need to approach it as you would do proactively as a professional organisation. Clarity, authenticity, and full adoption will allow you to create narrative that you will be able to communicate without fear. So please demonstrate what great organisations you work with and for, and why people deserve or should invest in your organisations. Do we have any questions? Oh, thank you so much. Gentleman in the front. Two questions.
First one is, I never really thought of the cross-industry collaboration. I like the meat thing.
Yeah.
And if you hook on the back of someone bigger than you,
yeah,
you can get bigger quicker.
Yeah.
But the second thing is the ESG strategy. I know everybody's different, but would you advise a certain length of time ahead? So like 5 years plus might be dreaming, 1 year might be too much pressure. Would you give an average time to set your benchmark? I know it's up to each company, but you've got to have a plan.
Yeah,
in the military,
yeah, definitely,
right?
definitely.
3 years? I don't know.
Yeah. So, well, your benchmark starts from now. So it starts from wherever you start. It just depends on which elements you bring in, because you'll find some of those you can already do now, but you just don't maybe communicate about it. So it might be within 6 months you're starting to communicate about things you're already doing.
Like the 17.
Yeah.
You might be doing 7.
So you might be doing some of those, or it might be 2 of those. So you can already communicate, exactly, you can already communicate about those. It's just creating that narrative and making sure you've got the data to prove that's what you're doing. And then it might be, you might have a 6-month program if you can see there's something extra you can do in 6 months. It might be for bigger things where it needs more investment, it might be 3 years. But then you would also still have maybe something that comes in saying, well, in a year's time we'll have reached this point. So we'll have invested in this machinery to make sure our efficiency has come down by this amount, a third of our goal for 3 years' time, whatever that might be. But it'll depend on the organisation and the industry, probably. Thanks, Paul. Yeah.
A lot of the ESG strategy stuff is traditionally tied up in like procurement or production and things like that, and sometimes a lot of those are reluctant to do things where it impacts like profits or top line figures. How or what advice would you have to a marketeer that wants to lead this change, either from internally or as a consultant, and how would you get people on board where they're concerned about having an impact on like production costs or procurement costs and things like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, thank you, and it's a really tough one to answer actually, to be honest, because it's really hard. It depends on the vision of the business, to be honest. If they're purely centered around profits and cost, then it's a really hard one to navigate. But having said that, if you can look at innovation and efficiency, then potentially there are cost savings there anyway. So it should be on their agenda, irrelevant of whether they think it should be or not. You know, it's still technically a cost-saving exercise, but also it's about culture and about solidity of the business as well. So if they're, I'm not going to say bothered, but if they're interested in their employees and want to retain those employees, then they're giving those employees a voice, but also bringing it into the culture of the business as well helps do that, so it becomes a more solid business for longer. So yeah, some different narrative to definitely have on it, but they shouldn't be blinkered to it.
Trying to show them a few case studies of like successful ESG strategies and what it's done for the business, like longer term.
Yeah.
To be able to sort of get people on board.
Yeah.
It is a bit of a difficult conversation.
It is a really hard one.
Like
Exactly. If they're not already in that kind of framework, yeah.
So if you win a tender that you wouldn't have won if you hadn't got that, then the profitability of that tender can pay for the growth.
Yeah, could do, yeah, and it gets reinvested. It might just be there's an area in that business where they're not able to tender, for example, because they don't have those qualities. So they might actually be missing out on part of the market, or when their competitors are missing out, so therefore they could move quicker. So it depends on kind of what's going on and what's in the industry, but yeah, it needs to be on the agenda full stop. Even if they are purely cost and profit oriented, then there are options to do that within this. That's okay. Anyone else got any questions? No, let off lightly. Oh, excellent. Okay. So if you would like to, you can follow me on LinkedIn for more of this kind of information and view thoughts, and I'm very happy to connect up. I also have a podcast which is called the Responsible Marketing Podcast. It's released every 2 weeks, so you can sign up and subscribe from there. But if you want to just have a chat with me for 30 minutes about your organisation or your industry or just your thoughts, that would be great as well. So you can email me or give me a buzz, whatever works for you. Thank you so much for coming as well.
Well done, Joe.
Thanks. Thank you.